Hey everybody, Emily Phillips here with another episode of Step to Stories, where you listen to awesome information and you get your steps in at the same time. We are so excited to have you here today, and I am super passionate about the topic that I want to discuss with you today, and that is the gift of ADHD. Yes, I call it a gift because I do not believe it's a disability. I believe it does come with its challenges, but it also comes with great gifts. And we're going to discuss all of those today. And there are things that I have done to cope with this disability or gift, if you will, my entire life. And we're going to talk about those things too. So let's start back. I had been diagnosed with ADHD when I was around the fourth grade. And yep, my fourth grade teacher let my mom know that I was talking too much in class and not paying attention. So back in those days, what did they do? They sent you to the doctor, and the doctor prescribed you Ritalin. Ritalin is what we had back in the day, and that's what they prescribed. I will never forget the first time I took that medication. I felt like a different person. Like I was interested in things that I normally wouldn't be. And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I remember my mom and dad saying one time, we used to go on these trips to my grandma's and grandpa's house every other weekend to Oklahoma, and I would just talk all in the back seat. And then one day I remember like looking back, and they're like, "Is that our daughter back there?" I was reading. Again, I don't know if that's good or bad. And I am not endorsing, or I am not discouraging anyone from taking medication. You totally need to talk to your doctor and make your choices with that. But I will tell you from my experience, the good and the bad from the medications that I have taken on my entire life for ADHD. But let's start back from the beginning. So, I was born with this condition, and a lot of people have a lot of theories of how this happens. And none of the things I'm saying may have any scientific backing, but I'm going to tell you some things that I have read that I found very interesting. I, for one, had a very traumatic birth. My mother said I should have definitely been a C section. I went up and down and up and down and up and down the birth canal so many times. She was in labor for so long. She nearly died, and so did I. And I was without oxygen for a long time because I had the cord wrapped around my neck. So, right then and there, could have been something that could have possibly caused this so called disorder. But I don't know for sure that that would be something, because I think it was just something I was born with and it wouldn't have mattered about my birth. But who knows? We'll never know. I'm excited that I have it because I've been able to use it for so many great things. So, back in the day before I was diagnosed, let's talk about some of the personality characteristics that I had. My mom said that I was talking extremely early. She said I would never sit still. I was constantly dancing, running up and down the room as fast as I possibly could. She also said I did not really play with toys. I was more interested in what she was doing. And I can remember when I was very little, also really interested in what my dad was doing and going to work with my dad. That fascinated me more than playing with Barbies. I never really had Barbies. I never really had dolls. I mean, my mom would buy them for me, but that wasn't really something I was interested in. I was more interested in like mimicking her when she would be having conversations or talking to other adults. I was kind of more interested in what adults were doing. Another thing that I did that she noticed was a little different than other children is I was absolutely 100% hypnotized by the television, like hypnotized. And I taught myself to read through Sesame Street, Letters and Numbers, and the Electric Company. This would be back in the late 70s, early 80s. And then Mr. Rogers was a huge part of my life at that time. And my mom said that I actually thought that these people were in the box, in the TV. And I would just be hypnotized by it. And she just remembers, it wasn't like I was watching TV all day, but definitely during Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, and the Electric Company. And I was reading right at the beginning of kindergarten, before kindergarten. And looking back, my parents wonder, was I memorizing the books or was I actually reading? But I was reading to the classes in kindergarten. And so those were things that I did extremely well. But let's talk about some things that I had some issues with. Social cues. That is one thing that a lot of people with ADHD have. And by the way, ADHD is now the only term that is technically used. ADD is no longer an actual diagnosis. It is ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Again, I don't think of it as a disorder. I think of it as a gift if you learn to use it correctly. But where was I going? See, that's so ADD. But social cues. So, for example, if two adults are talking, I may not pick up on the fact that I need to sit back and listen and not interrupt. Being impulsive, saying what is on your mind without thinking things through, taking risks. Um, Messy, messy, messy. And it's not that you're like a messy person in general, it's that you don't really see the mess until it's just so overwhelming. Now, I will say when a room is very, very clean, it's easy for me to keep it clean. And I know this is for a lot of people, but once a room starts getting cluttered, then you kind of don't see the clutter. But these were things that my mom talked about when I was little. You don't blend in very well. My mom was always trying to help me blend, and I just never did. She called me her little helium balloon that she was always trying to hold down. Bossy. I was always trying to lead something. I was trying to put something together, new ideas. I would take things I would learn at school and create sort of like new ideas and new things. I remember in the third grade, we were doing the Charlie Brown Christmas play, and they were just so impressed that I was able to memorize that script the way I was. Numbers as well. A very strange gift of memorization for numbers. I can remember phone numbers from when I was a little girl. If you tell me a credit card number, I can remember it. It's like I've got a certain photographic memory for certain pieces of information, and sometimes the information is not necessarily relevant or that important. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. But being impulsive was one, messy is another, not paying attention to detail. I talked about this on a couple of like TikToks and Instagram reels that I did about some things that I did before I realized that I had ADD. These were things that I would do to compensate for them. One of the things was I would I would write with a pencil as opposed to a pen, and I would print as opposed to cursive handwriting. And one of the reasons why is my handwriting was so messy because I would hold the pen really, really hard and go really, really fast. And with a pencil, the pencil doesn't move as fast as a pen. And when you print, you have to lift up each time. And so it would make my work much better. Another thing that I like to do is use a lamp. And I still to this day prefer lamplight. I still to this day prefer lamplight as opposed to full blown lights because it helps me focus in on the task at hand. I will tell you, and I don't know if this is a sensory thing for people with ADHD. If I accidentally say ADD, I'm sorry, I'm so used to saying ADD. But lights, overhead lighting really bothers me. I had a lot of sensory issues. Some of the things could have also been very similar to autism. Um, but like to this day, I cannot handle like Walmart. And it's not like really the people that bother me and that kind of stuff. It's the lighting that bothers me. Going to a doctor's office, I like to take my husband with me. I get anxiety, not because we're really going to the doctor. It's the lighting in the room actually makes me anxious. Um, Doctor's offices light, I can't handle it. If they dim the lights and give me a lamp light, I'm good. Or window light, I'm good. But overhead lights really bother me. Another thing is textures. I could not wear turtlenecks. I could not wear sweaters. And back in the 80s is when everybody wore pantyhose. And I hated wearing pantyhose. I couldn't stand the way they felt on my body. And I remember like after church or after having to wear pantyhose, the first thing I would do before I even got to the car was rip those things off, like something I did not like to do. Another thing I remember is being very nocturnal, and I still am to this day, having my brain was going a million miles an hour. My brain would be very alive at night, but then once I would fall asleep, it was really hard for me to wake up in the morning. So to this day, have had a hard time waking up in the morning, and it's something that I've always had challenges with. Um, but again, the gifts were I had tons of ideas. I was very creative. I was really, really good at dissecting like American literature and the symbolism in certain stories. I would see things that other people wouldn't. I remember when we did Macbeth and a couple other stories, I always got straight A's in those subjects. But what's interesting is like reading comprehension, that was tricky for me. Certain math classes I was great at, but math classes such as statistics and geometry that took a lot more attention to detail were a lot trickier for me to do. Um, I did really well learning through listening as opposed to reading. A lot of times I would read words, and the words when I would read a word, the sound of it in my head was different than if I would hear somebody say it. So I did better if somebody was actually reading it to me. But let's talk a little bit more about, and flashcards. Flashcards was a great tool that I would do. And if you have kids with ADD, if you'll put the question on one side and then the answer on the other side, that's a great way to when you're doing your homework. Another thing my mom said I used to do was crave sugar. And when I say crave sugar, like literally get up in the middle of the night and go eat spoonfuls of sugar. And there's no scientific evidence that's going to back what I'm about to say. This is just something I've come up with. So, don't fact check it or look it up. But I believe that people with ADD actually have an allergy to sugar. And that because they do, they crave it. So it's almost like an alcoholic having an allergy to alcohol. So like one candy bar is not enough, 20 is too many. Um, so was that what it is? Sorry, no, one candy bar is too many, 20 is not enough. Um, it's like I would crave the thing that did not serve me well. And to this day, if I right now were to eat a piece of cake or something, it completely changes my personality. It completely changes my brain. It's something about the way my brain chemistry is made up. I don't do well with sugar, but I also love sugar at the same time. So it's really tricky. I'm not one of these people that can just go with some friends and have some dessert and then just sort of function normally the rest of the day. I can't do it. Just like with alcohol, I'm not an alcoholic, but I can't just casually have a glass of wine during the day, probably because of the sugar. It just knocks me out for the rest of the day and I feel absolutely terrible. But let's talk about sort of the medication. So I remember being prescribed when I was in fourth grade. I remember having to go to the nurse and take my medication. I remember just being able to like focus so hard on subjects, and I got really quiet too when I would take it. And my mom said I would be really irritable when I would come home from school because it would wear off. It was short acting Ritalin at the time, so you kind of go up and then you come down. The purpose of AD meds it's kind of like, people call it speed for people that don't have ADHD. But for someone with ADHD, it's supposed to calm them down. But if you don't have the correct dosing, it can kind of like zone somebody out a little bit too much and change their personality. It also is an appetite suppressant and can make you super irritable when you come off of it. I remember in high school, I think it was high school, when I was prescribed dextroamphetamine. And this was a little bit more potent, a little more up and down. And I was on that for many, many, many years and still to this day take a little teeny tiny bit of it. I think it's more of a placebo effect than anything because I take literally maybe 2 milligrams where some people take 60. Looking back, if I could have done it all over again, I think maybe I wished that I had not been put on medication. And I only say that because here's how it did not serve me well. You can become addicted to them, and not so much like an addictive way that you might be thinking. But what happens is when your brain gets exposed to these types of medications, you begin to think that you can't function without them, that's the way your brain is supposed to be. And when your brain is getting these medications, they don't naturally make the chemicals that are needed to focus. And so when you're not taking them, you're feeling tired, you're feeling scattered, you're feeling just brain fog because your brain's been so used to getting these meds. And I don't blame the parents, and that's what they were told to do, and they trust their doctors. And I don't really necessarily even blame the doctors. I don't really know who you would blame on that, but there was a lot of kids back in the mid 80s that were put on these drugs. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure they've helped a lot of people. I mean, I've talked to a lot of parents that, I talked to one of my really good friends the other day. She said, we kept my son off the meds. We kept him off. And finally, like, we had no other option. And he went from making C's and D's to straight A's. So you know what? Like, that's a win. I think if you can take them in moderation, maybe not take them on the weekends, maybe not take them during the summer, I don't think it's a terrible thing. But looking back, I kind of wish I had done life without them, but it is what it is, right? I mean, you can't change that. I think there are some pretty bad side effects from them. You can be very irritable. Your body gets very tolerant to them. Especially nowadays, they're all generic. You can't even get the brand names anymore, and they're not. I don't think the quality is nearly as good as it used to be. I think it can make you aggressive, irritable, agitated, not be able to go to sleep at night. I think it can. I know that drug so well that like I can be talking to a complete stranger and know if they're on like Adderall. Like I just can tell. Like you can tell pretty easily if somebody's on that because they're just, I think a lot of people take it that don't have ADD, ADHD, and they react differently, or maybe they're taking too much of it. So there's pros and cons to that. What great jobs for people with ADD, and I think a lot of you guys probably know ADHD. I keep saying the wrong one. Sales is great because you get that constant dopamine hit. It's always exciting. There's action. You're meeting with people. You're doing something a little different every day. You're competitive. You have goals. A lot of people with ADHD are great at sports. A lot of great leaders have ADHD. You can look them up. I should put in the list in the comments of some of the most famous people that have ADHD. I think even Albert Einstein might have had it, but don't quote me on that. Some of the smartest people, my husband has it, and he's a doctor. So some of our greatest leaders have it. And I think if you use it, you use the gifts with it. And that are the ideas, being able to think off this, think quickly, being able to make decisions quickly, being able to take risks, being able to just go for it and not worry so much about the details. Now, is it good maybe that you're married to or have a business partner that's a little more grounded and can focus more on the details and things of that nature? Yes. Jobs for people with ADD, salespeople, insurance salespeople, recruiters, anything that's kind of like gives you an ability to like be creative and use those gifts. Maybe like a mathematician or a banker or something like that may not be someone with ADHD, but you never know. Like I said, if you are able to cope with it properly, you can really do whatever that you want to do. Having friends with ADHD can be tricky sometimes because quite often you might be late to things, not because you meant to, just because of the way your brain works. As you're walking out the door, you're thinking of 10 other things that you need to do. Funny thing about people with ADHD, I think a lot of people have this misconception that they're always scattered and can't focus, but it's actually quite the opposite. We actually can do what's called hyperfocus. So I can get so focused, I can get more done sometimes in 1 hour than somebody else can get done in a whole day. Now the problem is other people might be more consistent every day with little actions, whereas I can go all out for a few hours and then wear myself out because I went so hard. But they call that a hyper focus. Like you get more focused than the average person would on certain things, especially with the medication. When you're on medication, it can even go, even stronger than that. The other thing I think that is challenging with people with ADHD is finishing what we start, because we often have these big ideas and projects, and if they don't go as according to plan or they don't happen as quickly as we want them to, then we get bored and we go on to the next thing and we never finish what we started. Or we start this new diet, or we start this new daily routine, and then the second we get off course, we're all in or we're all out. So that can be a problem. Friendships, like I said, a lot of times we miss social cues. We tend to not blend in. People with ADHD, you may not see them running around with groups of friends all the time. Usually they'll have more like one or two close friends, and they'll have lots of friends, but they just, like I said, they just don't blend. They're just a little bit different, and that's okay. What else? There's so many things to say about it, but I think for people with ADHD to have labels, where things go, just so that your brain can help you remember, being able, whatever system they come up with. A person with ADHD can probably tell you what's in the corner of their closet. Like they'll know. It might be a cluttered mess to you, but they will know exactly where everything is. My husband's really weird. Like he can tell you if something's been touched. It's like the princess in the pea with the bed. Like she knows that there's a pea under the 10 mattresses. Like we just know. We know if something's been moved, even if it's a clutter. And so it's good to have a housekeeper, but sometimes you get frustrated because something gets moved and like they would never think you'd notice, but you certainly do notice. Relationships can be really tricky sometimes with ADHD, just because, like I said, they're typically not great with money, managing money, They typically know the money's out when the checks are bounced. So they need to have a partner or a companion or someone help them with their money. Now, if they get really hyper focused on money and they're really interested in that, then they'll be extraordinary at it. And I know that it's kind of a catch 22. Like, which one is it, Emily? Are they good with money or are they not? It kind of just depends. But typically, I would say people with ADHD probably aren't as good with money. They love to say what's on their mind and they're genuine and they love. They have lots of love and they grieve when people die and they are empathetic. They have empathy for people, and you may not sense that they have empathy because of their personality, but they certainly do. They're also extremely sensitive people, and get their feelings hurt many times over, more than the average person. Why, I'm not so sure. Might just be hypersensitivity to certain situations, but self-esteem issues, I'm sure that they have. Um, but yeah, there's just so much about this topic, and I would love to go maybe even talk about some of our famous people that have ADHD and talk about how they've used their gifts. Um, some of the other things that I think can help: exercise. Exercise is huge because it helps us balance out. It helps us get that excess energy out. When I don't exercise, I'm irritable, I'm agitated. Also, a good sleep routine. I am working on this right now. I'm reading a really good book. I've just started it. Let's see if I finish it. Huh, no pun intended. Matt Walker, I think is his name. It talks about the sleep, the hygiene of sleep, or why sleep is important. I think sleeping for people with ADHD is a major issue. A lot of times we go to bed late and get up super early or have a hard time waking up. Or sometimes we're overstimulated with caffeine that we've been self-medicating on, or medications that keep us up late at night. And so our adrenal glands are really shot. Having children can be tough when you have ADHD because you got to not only remember stuff for yourself, but you got to remember things for them. If we have a good system to follow, we're typically good at it. But it just kind of depends on the season in life. I mean, we're either really focused on what we're doing or we're just scattered. And we're all in and we're all out. I mean, that's just kind of a lot of our personalities. Now, I think there's different degrees of ADHD. I think there's different types of it. I think some people can have attention problem but not be hyperactive. And I think, I was talking to one of my girlfriends about this, or they can be hyperactive and not have attention problems. There's just different types that you can have. But I think was hyperactive with attention issues and learned to do a lot of coping skills myself. And then obviously was on medication as well. I don't take nearly the amount of medication that I used to, and I'm practically not even on it anymore. I don't even probably need it at all. Like I said, I think it's more of a placebo effect. But if I could go back in time and have done life without the meds, I definitely would have chosen that. A really good friend of mine always he used to tell me when I was taking more meds, he goes, I knew when you were on medication, your personality was totally different. And when you're on it, you don't know because you're on it, right? So you don't notice anything different, but your friends and your family, they do. They'll notice something. You can almost become a little bit bipolar acting, things like that, because it essentially is speed. Now, it's not supposed to act like speed for people with ADHD, but if too much is taken, or the dosing is not right, or if the type of medication is not right, then it can definitely affect you in a negative way. And I think people also abuse that medication. Unfortunately, people that don't have ADHD take it for other reasons, whether it be diet or just being able to stay up. But anyway, there's so many things I could talk about this subject. I love that I have it. I wouldn't change that I have it. But I would say give them grace. Like they're wonderful, loving people. And unfortunately, some of them choose the wrong path. And then some of them choose extraordinary paths. And it's really down to what path they choose. Because I really think that it's a gift God's given them. They have this unique ability to use their brain and be so creative and take risks and put themselves out there and just say what's on their mind. And yes, that can come back to bite them, especially in a very tight knit corporate environment where you really have to be a rule follower and you have to pay attention to detail. That can be really tricky. I think they work best in more mid-sized companies, startups type of company, home-based business. You'll find a lot of home-based business owners have ADHD because they just can't work for somebody else. They don't like that type of micromanagement. I've always thrived in an environment where they noticed my strengths, let me do my thing, and did not micromanage me. That's just where I thrive. Anxiety and depression have been related to ADHD. But again, things like exercise, fish oil can be really helpful. Green tea. There's a lot of things that people with ADHD can take, supplements that can help, can't cure it, but can help with attention. Eating really good diet. I would say a whole food or paleo diet or an AIP diet um, is super helpful. Like when I'm on Whole30 or paleo, my brain functions like fire. Like when I remove sugar from my diet, my brain is on fire. And I even have a profile. I even have a picture of myself, and it says that those exact words. When I take sugar out of my diet, my brain's on fire. So it's got to have something to do with the body chemistry, the brain chemistry, something to do with attention deficit and sugar. Don't know what the correlation is, but I definitely feel like there is some type of correlation. So if your kids have it, it's okay. It's a great thing. It's a blessing. And a lot of you are like, seriously? No, it is. If you just can learn how to cope with it, make a decision whether or not you're going to medicate, really look at the pros and cons, and just remember that medication, they will become dependent on and have high tolerance for. So they'll have to increase as they get older. Um, I didn't just stop taking it when I was college. I continued to take it. I also think, now I'm not making this medical claim, but I do have cervical dystonia. It's a tick in my neck where my neck contracts without me telling it to. I'm not saying that the ADHD meds caused it, but I certainly don't think they helped. I know that when I'm taking more of that than normal, it's much worse. The medication can also make you more prone to things like nicotine and other behaviors that you might not normally do. And my mom has even said, like, she wishes I had never taken it because it can cause you to do things that you may not normally do. But then there's some people out there, they couldn't function without it. So you gotta weigh the pros and cons. I know there's like other therapies out now, like biofeedback therapy and different types of cognitive behavioral therapies that are out that can help with it. And systems that you can create that can help with it. Also, like classical music in the background or white noise when you're working is super helpful. Why? Because you can't hear the pin drop. If you have a kid with ADHD, a great thing for them to tell them to do is when they're in a classroom, if they could sit on the side of the classroom but turn their desk to the back so they don't hear the noises behind them, but they're close to the teacher. Also, getting those reviews for the tests are really good because typically kids with ADHD are great memories. They have great memorization skills. I was in 504 in school, so I was able to take the test untimed and by myself, and that made a huge, huge difference. If you have ADD and you want to talk ADHD and you want to talk about some of your challenges or successes with it in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We have all kinds of things. We talk about true crime. We talk about learning disabilities. We talk about anorexia nervosa. We talk about everything under the sun, sex trafficking, you name it. We've got so much good stuff on here. By the end of this video, you should have at least gotten 3,000 to 3,500 steps. I hope you do. I hope you did. I hope you guys have a great day. And remember, if you have ADHD or your kids do, it's okay. It's a gift. And I know some of you might come on here and go, it's not a gift. It's been really difficult for my life. I get it. I get it. I have it. I know it's hard, but I try to make the best of everything and look at the bright side of everything and focus on the positives because we're not going to change that we have it. We just got to focus on the positives. So hope this video was helpful. And send me a comment. Love to hear from you. Love to hear your feedback. And make sure you subscribe. Thanks, everybody. Hope you got your steps in today. Have a great one. Bye for now.